I think a lot of us visually impaired people, like, we take our routine for granted, if that makes sense, because we rely on our routine to sort of keep track of where we are in the week. I don't know, it's hard to explain, actually, without the point of words. But me personally, I honestly rely on my routine. There's been a few times over the past couple of weeks I haven't been able to know what it is. Right, so my name is John William Armstrong, and I have retinitis pigmentosa. I have tunnel vision. I'm fully blind in my right eye, and I'm monochromatic colorblind. I heard, like, obviously when I got registered partially sighted, the woman from the RNIB turned around and said, "Oh, there's a local visually impaired league in Sunderland." And I thought to myself, well, I already bowl anyway, so I might as well. And plus, it gets me out of the house, because, as I've previously mentioned, I don't go anywhere to start up with. So, it was a relief in a way. It's the social setting, finding common ground with, people that are similar, that have similar disabilities or in similar situations that I am, that we can all sort of like just come together. We were bowling on the same two lanes. Like, I was bowling on the left, she was bowling on the right, and she's, I put in like a really high first game, something like a 190 or something, and she just pulled us straight away and was like, "Are you actually visually impaired?" I was like, "Yeah, I am, trust me." I'm not putting it on. And she was like, what conditions do you have? And that's when I mentioned the RP and the colour blindness and everything, and she got really intrigued by it. And she started asking how bad the RP was. So obviously I mentioned about how constrained the eye is and everything, and she started making comparisons with obviously her own. And it sort of struck both of us pretty much at the same time that, we had something in common, and that's how me and Anne-Marie just got talking straight away. School was probably the worst time of my life. Well, there were several factors. There was the bullying, obviously, that didn't help, but the lack of understanding and the lack of support from the teachers was phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. Again, it was more the whole, they thought I was putting it on. I mean, the only one that really understood was my head of year, but she didn't have the authority to do anything. It was, it was more the deputy head and head mistress. When, my dad came up to school with me one day and tried to explain the fact that I have visual impairment and everything and I needed support, you can imagine her response. That really didn't help. We used to sit in reverse alphabetical order, so people with surnames of Z would be at the front and A would be at the back. Me being an Armstrong, and I couldn't see anything. If I was asked to go back, no. If I had to relive it, I couldn't. I really couldn't. But like I say, if it wasn't for my head of year, I don't think I would have survived the 5 years, even longer even. It was kind of heartbreaking for him. He would come in from work on, for mistake, on the evening and ask how my day was, and I'm like, well, same old story. And he would march up to the school the next day with me in tour and, demand to speak to the headmistress, rattle the headmistress's cage, and still nothing happened. It eventually got to the point in my second from last year of school, a couple of girls turned around and said, if you need us to write down what's on the board, we'll write it down for you, tear it out of our notebook, we'll just give it to you. So there was that, at least. And I don't even think if it wasn't for them, then I doubt I would have aced my exams. I mean, I still did really well, but it was the sheer lack of understanding and the support was just ignorance. there isn't a lot that puts me off because I rely more on my ears, on the sound, than anything else. Like, I don't bowl with my eyes. So, when I was younger, when I was growing up, I was in the juniors, they taught me how to bowl with my ears. So basically what that means is the sound of the ball hitting the lane and then the ball hitting the pins. So if there's for argument's sake, I leave 2 pins standing, both on the left-hand side. If there's a large sound to the right of my, on my right side, then I know that there's pins left standing on the left, and then vice versa. It took a while to get used to, but yeah, it's the bowling with the ears. It's an alternative because eventually I am going to end up probably fully blind, and I wouldn't want to stop bowling just because I've lost my eyesight. So at least this way, I sort of have a backup. When I was growing up, me and my dad's relationship wasn't exactly the best. He was, he was fresh out of the Navy in 1994, which was the year I was born, and obviously he still had that, discipline, the whole strictness of it all, which was completely understandable. I mean, me being me, I didn't fully understand it, but there you go. It wasn't until his accident 6 years ago, he suddenly went from doing everything to doing nothing overnight, and that hit him really hard. He'd become clinically depressed, he didn't have any motivation for anything. He suddenly went from, being able to do the garden, the washing, the housework, all in a matter of the morning, to literally doing nothing. And it was painful, from my perspective, to see him suddenly stop doing stuff, because when I was younger, we used to go out and play football, and then he just couldn't go anywhere. There was a wheelchair at the door, and everything changed. He was at work in Argos. His manager sent 3 mini fridges roughly the size of a tumble dryer up the belt to be stored in the warehouse. Approximately 7:45 that evening, when the shop was shutting, and my dad was alone in the warehouse by himself. He couldn't just leave them on the belt, health and safety reasons, so he had no choice but to take them off the belt. He got the first 2 off no problem, but when it come to getting the 3rd one off, his back just clicked. It was him lifting it that did it. The L5, L6 vertebrae at the base of the spine, just above your pelvic ridge, is the bones that are damaged, and that's what sort of blocks the transmitters between your spine and your legs, which basically means you have difficulties walking or you become paralysed. Fortunately, my dad got lucky. He can still walk to a certain degree. He can walk from, say, my front door to the front gate, which is about 10 feet, and then, he's screwed. He can't go anywhere by himself. He's got to have someone with him. And it wasn't until about a week or 2 after his accident that it sort of hit me that he needed help with things, like even daily things like getting washed, getting readied, etc. So that sort of became he became my life. We still try and keep him active, instead of doing all these things all at once. He'll do 1 per day or 1 every few days, so he's not, knacking himself. But it's still, he's in pain 24/7, and there's just nothing I can do. If I could literally click my fingers and fix it for him, I would. It changes the way you see things. It made me realise that, you're not invincible. Six o'clock on the dot, my alarm goes off. And I wake him up, I'll give him a shake, and explain that at 6 o'clock it's time for him to get up, because he's used to the whole 6 o'clock routine. He's had it since he was in the Navy, so I've had to adapt to that one. But I don't mind. it's, I get up, I help him get up, out of bed, sort his breakfast out. He has breakfast, I don't eat breakfast. He, sort of watches the telly for a bit, and then about 8 o'clock-ish, take him upstairs, get him in the shower, let him shower, wash himself, to the point where he gets to about his waist, and then I do the rest because, I don't want him bending over and potentially knacking his back further. And then from there, it's get him dry, get him ready, take him back downstairs while I get washed and ready, and then we do whatever we need to do that day. Let's go shopping or, take care of something in the house. Plans for the future would probably, the obvious one is guide dog training, because, it's going to get to the point where I am going to need one. It's not a question of if, it's when. And hopefully, my vision doesn't decline as quickly as it has been. I'm hoping that it just sort of steadies out for a little bit and gives me, say another 10 years, as it is now, so I can still see roughly what I'm doing. But, I don't want to get a guide dog this quick, because going back to the whole, the whole change thing, I hate change. So I think the whole aspect of getting a guide dog it's realistic, and something I have to strongly consider, just not at this current stage. And I've had the cane since roughly mid-March. It's happened, it's something I've had to do. I wasn't exactly happy about it because, change. Didn't feel like, it was totally necessary, given my current eyesight at this time. It has come in handy, looking back on it now, it definitely has helped. The only thing that bothers me is the online delivery service. There is no chance of getting a delivery slot online. I'm forced, basically, to go down to the shops. That's the disappointing thing about it. People are all nicey, don't get me wrong, when you're out and about. But when it comes down to it, bottom line, they are going to look out for themselves rather than the vulnerable. I mean, I said it to my dad the other night. I said it's basically survival of the fittest, and it shouldn't be. You should be looking after the disabled and the vulnerable before anything else. We'll get back to ball eventually enough.